Where Is Everybody is the very first episode of The Twilight Zone.
The place is here. The time is now.
Now that we've narrowed that down, let's get on with the episode. Here's Mike Ferris. You might recognize him as the cook in Forbidden Planet, who got all liquored up thanks to Robbie the Robot. But no such luck here. In fact, when he arrives in the cafe with the jukebox blaring, there's no customers. Might be the lousy service. Nobody's there to serve breakfast, not in the kitchen or even out back, despite there being coffee still on the stove. Either something fishy happened to everyone, or the owner's trying to accidentally burn the place down for the insurance money. Mike, for reasons of simplicity, I'm going to refer to Mike Ferris by name, even though we don't know who he is yet, because even he doesn't know who he is, or how he got here. It's the 50s version of The Hangover, basically. Well, with nobody answering him, Mike decides to head into town. Except it's empty too. The streets, the stores, everything. He finally spots a woman in a nearby truck. All he has to do is just not act like a crazy man and scare her away.
Well, it's a real oddball thing, but when I woke up this morning, I didn't exactly wake up. I just found myself out on that road walking.
Well, that sounds perfectly sane. Nice work. See what you did there? Everyone knows that when you spook a woman, her natural defense is to turn into a mannequin. It's just like a turtle pulling into its shell. All you have to do is not be creepy.
As a matter of fact, I've always had kind of a secret yen for the quiet type. Get what I mean, babe?
Okay, to avoid being creepy, do the exact opposite of whatever you think would be a good idea. Still, at least he's talking to a female mannequin and not a male one. This is the 50s after all. They were pretty strict back then. One man, one woman-shaped piece of plastic with jigsawed orifices lined with foam padding, as God intended. He's drawn away to the sound of a ringing phone in a telephone booth. He closes the door, because being the only human in this entire town is not enough privacy for some people. But it turns out there's nobody on the line, and he can't even reach the operator. But what adds to his anxiousness is the feeling that he's being watched. What's more, it's starting to seem more and more like when he gets near, people are just vanishing in the midst of whatever they were doing. He's convinced he must be dreaming, quoting Scrooge's rebuke of the ghost of Jacob Marley, that he's just something eaten that is provoking this madness. And yet the place is so filled with details, even an entire high school basketball schedule. Still, an entire rack of books titled The Last Man on Earth would be a pretty big coincidence if it weren't a dream. He finally spots a placard that triggers something.
Air Force! I'm in the Air Force! I'm in the Air Force! Hey, I'm in the Air Force!
I figured it out. What do I win? Well, nothing, unfortunately. He's still alone, despite the projector starting up to show a film. Oh, great. On top of everything else, he's got 7 years bad luck. The town that Mike Ferris is in is more than just an empty town. There's messages for him seemingly everywhere. Some hidden, some more obvious. In desperation bordering on madness, he begins pushing the crosswalk button and gibbering for help.
Help me! Help me! Help me!
I'm starting to think cable's not ready for the All Desperate Please channel. He's actually in an isolation booth for testing to see how a man can handle a trip to the moon, make several orbits, and return, nearly 3 weeks. The problem, the Air Force doctor says, is they can pump in everything for the body except
man's hunger for companionship.
The mannequin was a good attempt there, at least. Where Is Everybody was created as the series pilot. What should be noted is that while oftentimes the first episode of a series will be called a pilot, these are actually made to sell the show, be sort of a proof of concept. It may not be the first one broadcast. It may never be broadcast, in fact. Serling was involved in selling the series to potential sponsors. This footage is of him explaining the premise of his anthology show. Serling had made a name for himself on the CBS prestige drama anthology Playhouse 90, where his Requiem for a Heavyweight earned him the first Peabody Award for standalone television work. Keeping Serling happy was at least partly the reason CBS was willing to even consider The Twilight Zone. Originally, Serling was only present on camera to pitch to sponsors, explaining there would be engaging stories, plot twists, and that good storytelling provides a better avenue to sell the sponsor's products. The original narrator was Westbrook Van Voorhis, whose voice was famous for the March of Time. However, his tone was deemed too pompous.
There is a sixth dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity.
Sort of a vocal typecasting. He sounds kind of like he's about to give a news report. Man finds out he's been turned into Hitler. That story coming up after this word from Camel Cigarettes. When you smoke a Camel, you're breathing America. Orson Welles was suggested instead, which Serling didn't like, and thus he was relieved that Welles' price was so high he knew that no one was going to want to pay it. So instead he got to do it, which would help cement the Twilight Zone's cult status, as his unique way of speaking, different from other narrators on shows such as The Outer Limits, and his frequent on-screen presence made it as much about him as about the ideas, the common fixture in the anthology show, but not as a character. The original pilot was to be The Happy Place, a dystopia where when people reach 60, they are sent to the happy place to be euthanized, reasoning they had nothing left to contribute to society. The episode was considered too dark to serve as a pilot. Remember, they were already trying to sell people on an idea that was deemed questionable. And so Where Is Everybody was written to be a replacement, based upon Serling reading about such tests in a magazine. He connected it to an experience he had while walking across an empty studio lot, and having an eerie sense of absence of humanity where there should be humanity. What's notable about this pilot is the trepidation by some to make a science fiction show, even with Serling's reputation. So one thing you'll note about this pilot is that there's actually nothing fantastical about it. It's one man's hallucination explaining everything. But from context, it makes logical sense. More on that in a moment. That's something that Serling disliked about it, actually. In fact, when he wrote the short story version for this one, he had Mike Ferris take a ticket going into the theater and tearing it in half, pocketing the stub, only to find as he's brought out that there is half a ticket stub in his pocket. The pilot episode is one of only 2 episodes not done at MGM. This was actually shot at Universal. It was a one-time favor to CBS, as Universal didn't rent out their locations to other production companies. If this place looks familiar, you might recognize it from one of Universal's later projects, a little flick called Back to the Future. The episode turns on 3 points, which are related to the situation that Mike Ferris is in within reality. First, there are repeated moments of confinement. He gets stuck in a phone booth, unable to remember how to get out of it. Later, he's nearly trapped inside a jail cell. And it's not just about being trapped, but trapped all alone. Serling's apocalyptic fears having a subtle influence there. Second is the concept of being watched. These people repeatedly appear through representations. The mannequin, the eye of the shop window, and a persistent sense of being seen by the unseen. The way everything looks as if the person just vanished contributes to a conspiratorial sense. Most people have at one time in their life been alone, yet had a feeling, for good or for ill, that they're not alone. This plays into that fear. Third is the loss of identity. This is 1959. America was undergoing a radical cultural shift, and it was easy to sympathize with someone who felt they didn't know who they were anymore, what their place was in the world, if they were perhaps going to be left behind by a changing society. Where Is Everybody isn't one of the greats, but it's surprising how good it actually is, given its nature. This entire episode rides on the back of character actor Earl Holliman, and he carries it with skill. He's got a great stack of talents for an actor, and a strong versatility and a sense of inner life in his characters. In this, he's a man succumbing to the effect of isolation. Everything was an invention of his mind, and here's the fascinating part. In the decades since this episode aired, cognitive psychologists believe that the parts of the brain responsible for handling sensory input are accustomed to handling a huge amount of information and making sense of it. So when there is little input, the information feels incomplete, and the brain desperately tries to make sense of the fragments of information it thinks it's getting, and, I'm quoting the exact words of the article here, it tries to construct a reality from the scant signals available to it, yet it ends up building a fantasy world. Which is what happened. Except, there is one small point that, while it can be explained away, still lingers. That this hallucination isn't dreamlike, but detailed, meticulously detailed, seemingly beyond what someone would simply invent. Hence the ticket stub idea cementing the implication of it, that this was more than just a delusion. As Serling says, you unlock the door with imagination, and on the other side of that door is the Twilight Zone.